1, reading from verse 9. For God is my witness, whom I serve with my spirit in the gospel of the Son, that without ceasing I make mention of you always in my prayers, making request if by some means now at last I may find a way in the will of God to come to you. Verse 10 is a verse that marked my life. I remember reading it and a question popped into my heart. How important is the will of God to me as a Christian? I look at Paul here writing. He had a desire to go to visit the church in Rome, and though there was no freedom in his heart, he was hindered not to go for a period, but he kept on seeking for a way in the will of God to go there. And I see in the Apostle Paul an attitude of heart where there was a seeking, there was a wanting, almost like with his whole being, he wanted to be in the will of God. He wanted to do things in the will of God. And in my own life, there are times when, I've had plans, I've had visions, I've had projects, and I so desperately wanted to do them. And I pushed and I did them, and I was devastated, lost my peace, ended up being out of the will of God for my life. But there are times when I've had things in my heart. I've wanted to do things. I've wanted to do projects. And in my heart, I felt, no, I must seek the Lord. And I've sought the Lord and I've waited, seeking the Lord for His will, and faith arose in my heart and I was able to do the things that I needed to do. And I've had to go through hardships doing those things. There were struggles. They were not easy. Just because it was the will of God, it wasn't easy. But there was grace. There was a faith in my heart. There was a peace from the Lord. And in my heart, I've always wondered, does it mean that because we're Christians, everything that we want is the will of God? I found it not to be so. Because when we look in the book of Romans chapter 12, reading particularly verse 2, Paul writes and he says, be not conformed to the pattern of this world, but be ye transformed by the renewing of your mind, that you may be able to prove what is that good and acceptable and perfect will of God. We see there that there is a continual work that needs to be taking place in our hearts and in our lives to conform us to the image of Christ, that the desires that we carry may be in line with the will of God, that we may be people whose minds, whose hearts, whose lives have been transformed, and we are able to live in the will of God. We are able to prove, in a sense, what the will of God is in its goodness, in its perfection, in its fullness, in its completeness. And I look at the life of Jesus in the Garden of Gethsemane. Jesus is about to face the cross, and he cries from his heart and he says, Lord, if there's a way that this can pass away without me having to go through what I need to go through, without me having to take this cup, Lord, can we have it that way? But at the end he says, but not my will, but your will. And in my heart, I know that the Lord wants us to be people that want to live in His will. People that desire to live our lives in His will, to please Him. People that, when we are in His will, there is a grace, there is a faith, there is a peace that rises from our hearts. And everything and anything that we want to do for the Lord, we are able to do because we are in the will of the Lord. And I want to encourage you today that whatever you want to do, I encourage you, seek the will of the Lord. Seek to always be in the will of the Lord. May the Lord bless you.